Kamala Harris is the favorite to be the 2028 Democratic nominee. Despite losing the 2024 election to Trump in a landslide, she still commands support from 41% of the Democratic Party, far ahead of Gavin Newsom in second place at just 8 points, Josh Shapiro in third at 7, and then Pete Buttigieg and Tim Walz tied for fourth at just 6. On the Republican side, J.D. Vance is the clear favorite. He's at 37%, 28 points ahead of Vivek Ramaswamy at 9, and Nikki Haley also at 9, with Ron DeSantis at just 8. This is a huge surprise, as Kamala Harris is probably the worst person Democrats could ever think of nominating in the next election. She clearly isn't liked. That's why she lost all 7 swing states, with 6 flips going towards Trump. I mean, she is going to lose Arizona by 5 points, Georgia by 2, Pennsylvania by 2. She couldn't even win Michigan or Wisconsin. Her performance was atrocious, but for some reason, Democrats still want her. However, it is still unlikely that she will actually win. She's probably going to lose more and more support over the next few years. If we look at the betting markets, she only has a 6% chance of actually ending up as the nominee. Gavin Newsom is currently the favorite. He would also be a disaster for the Democratic Party. In terms of strategy, Democrats are best if they go with one of their 2 Midwestern governors of Josh Shapiro or Gretchen Whitmer, because they need Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. These 3 states are only moving further and further to the right, and so if Democrats nominate one of the big establishment Democrats like Newsom or Harris, they are going to be screwed once again. On the Republican side, though, things are a little bit different. J.D. Vance is actually the favorite to be the nominee based on the betting markets. He's the clear favorite, actually, with a 45% chance of winning. As long as nothing terrible happens during his vice presidency, he is the clear successor to the former president. Vivek Ramaswamy is in second. He is definitely a rising star within the GOP, and it will be interesting to see if he can keep up this momentum over the next 4 years. Then we have Don Jr. and Ron DeSantis. It really seems unlikely to me that DeSantis is ever going to be the Republican nominee for president. He had his chance in 2024. If he waited until 2028, he probably would have had a higher chance of actually getting the nomination at some point, but he screwed himself over in 2024, and it's unlikely that the Florida governor is going to advance further in his political career. Looking at Trump, he is incredibly popular right now. His transition has an approval rating of 54%, just 40% disapprove. The former president right now and the new president-elect, he is more popular than he has ever been compared to 2016, 2020, at any point when he was in office or running for the presidency against Kamala Harris. Donald Trump is at his peak in terms of popularity. We'll see how high that can go and if he can maintain this high approval. And now looking towards the future, J.D. Vance is in a very good position to become the 48th president. He is likely to be the future of the GOP following Trump, and in the past, he hasn't always been the most confidence-inspiring candidate. When he ran for Senate in 2022, it was a rather close election. He ran against Tim Ryan, who was a good nominee on the Democratic side. Of course, Republicans still won. It is still Ohio, a state that just trends further and further to the right. But when he was first chosen to be vice president, a lot of people were skeptical of Vance, but after his debate with Tim Walz, he really proved himself, and if he can continue that over the next 4 years, there's no doubt he is going to be a popular vice president with a very good chance at being elected the next president. And so in this video, I'll be making a 2028 election prediction between Kamala Harris and J.D. Vance. It might be unlikely that Harris will be the nominee, but weirder things have definitely happened in American politics. Kamala Harris is still the favorite right now. She commands 41% support. That is undoubtedly high. It's obviously going to come down, but if she does seek the nomination in 4 years, she is automatically going to be the frontrunner. There is that group of the Democratic Party that believes that Kamala Harris can do it if she runs again. They see 2024 as an anomaly, and Republicans, they should hope that this group of the party doesn't continue to shrink. If Kamala Harris is the Democratic nominee in 4 years, it is going to be a disaster for the party once again. And so we'll begin by filling in the solid states for both Vance and Harris. Starting off with the solid red states, we have Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, all of Nebraska except the 2nd District, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, South Carolina, as well as the 2nd District of Maine, Iowa, Ohio, Texas, Florida, and Alaska. These are all states the vice president-elect is going to win by 12 percentage points or more, and this puts him just 51 electoral votes away from the presidency at 219. I mean, this is an incredibly impressive list of states. Trump and the GOP have transformed the Electoral College with his win in 2024. I mean, Iowa was decided by 13 points, even though we had that one Ann Seltzer poll that showed Harris leading by 3. It was 16 points off. In Ohio, Trump won by 11. Vance will be able to win by 12. This is his home state. He is still a sitting senator from the Buckeye State, and he will be until he gets sworn in to become the vice president. In Texas, Trump won by 14, his largest margin ever. Texas is no longer shifting to the left. In fact, the opposite is happening. And in Florida, I mean, the transformation here has been incredible. Trump won the state by 1% in 2016. He then won it by 3 in 2020, and now the margin has ballooned to 13. And now for the vice president, I don't see her doing any better than she did in 2020. I will give her Washington, her home state of California, Hawaii, as well as the 1st District of Maine, Vermont, Massachusetts, Delaware, Maryland, and the District of Columbia, basically the most liberal states in the country. And so with the safe states filled in for both candidates, J.D. Vance leads with 219 electoral votes, 118 ahead of Kamala Harris, who is at just 101. And now time for the likely states. These states will go to either Vance or Harris by 5 to 12 point margins. I mean, a lot of solid blue states from the Biden era in 2020, they became likely for Kamala Harris in 2024. But we will begin with the likely states for J.D. Vance. I have Arizona, a state that Trump was able to win by 5. If the state continues to shift back towards the Republicans, the GOP is only going to do better and better. In terms of North Carolina and Georgia, I do see North Carolina as being a state where Vance can crack that 5-point margin. The only reason why Trump didn't perform better in the Tar Heel state is because of Mark Robinson, the Republican candidate for governor. He lost his race by 14 points. He definitely had an impact on the presidential election. If Trump didn't have Robinson behind him, he would have been able to win North Carolina, I believe, by at least 5 points, but Mark Robinson is not going to be on a major ticket again, and so J.D. Vance, he will likely be able to squeeze by with a likely margin of victory in the Tar Heel state. Meanwhile, for Kamala Harris, we have a lot of states that were solid blue in 2020, not in 2024. Oregon, Colorado, New York, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, they're all going to be likely for the vice president, as well as Illinois. The margin here, I mean, it was a drastic change. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Barack Obama, they all won Illinois by 17-point margins in the last 3 elections. But Kamala Harris, she comes in and she wins the state by just 11, a huge drop-off from where it was before. Now, Colorado is going to be likely blue because this is one of the few states where Kamala Harris's performance wasn't terrible. Joe Biden won it by 13.5, Kamala Harris winning by 11. It's not the worst, but Colorado is also the state that has had the largest leftward shift over the last 20 years. It is definitely moving to the left, and that's the only reason why it remains a likely state for Democrats. And to the states that remain, this is what is going to be the battleground map in the next election. We might see Arizona, North Carolina potentially be competitive, but it's going to be centered around the Midwest once again. Minnesota is also going to be close, even though Kamala Harris's running mate Tim Walz was the literal governor of the state that was reelected by a double-digit margin in 2022. Kamala Harris only squeaked by with a 4-point margin of victory. Even Joe Biden won Minnesota by 7 points just 4 years prior, and he didn't have the state's literal governor on the ticket with him. And so it's these states that will decide the next election. We're probably going to see a lot less of Iowa, Ohio, Texas, or Florida just because of how conservative they've gotten. And so now starting off with the lean red states for J.D. Vance, he's going to win them by 1 to 5 percentage points, and it's going to be pretty similar to the states that Trump carried in 2024. All the swing states that he was able to pick up. J.D. Vance is, of course, going to hold on to Georgia. He'll probably be able to win it by around 3 to 4, basically matching Donald Trump's margin. The state is generally Republican. It has taken a leftward shift over the last few years, but it does seem it's coming back to the Republican column, especially after the disastrous campaign Democrats ran over the last few months. We also have Nevada, a state where Trump became the first Republican to win in 20 years. He carried it by 4%, a surprisingly large margin considering that he lost it by 2.4% to both Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton. We also have a few more states up in the Midwest: Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. These were the 3 states Kamala Harris needed. If she won these 3 states, she would have become elected the 47th president. But obviously, she lost all 3 of them. She had to win all 3, so losing even one would have ended it for her. In Pennsylvania, Donald Trump won by just under 2 points. In Michigan, he won by just over 1, and in Wisconsin, the margin was 0.9. So the races here were close, but the Midwest in general is shifting towards the right. And so J.D. Vance, I can definitely see him winning all 3 of them by at least 1%, probably around 2 to 4. Now, for Kamala Harris, we do have 2 lean states that she is going to win by 1 to 5%. Starting off with Maine, the state was okay for her. The state does use ranked choice voting, so it does benefit Democrats slightly. Kamala Harris won it by 7 points. I see her winning it by around 4 if she were the nominee ever again. And then we have New Jersey. I mean, this state has gotten incredibly competitive. It is unbelievable just how close New Jersey was. Kamala Harris is going to win here by just 6%, even though Joe Biden carried it by 16 in 2020. Even Hillary Clinton won it by a solid margin in 2016. She carried it by 14. So not even that big of a difference between Clinton and Biden's margins. But when you look at Harris, I mean, there is a drastic drop. And so we are now left with the 4 tilt states. All of them will be decided by less than 1%, or at least close to it. These are going to be the most competitive states on the map. All of them went to Kamala Harris in 2024, but if she is a repeat nominee, she is only going to do worse, especially in Minnesota. I mean, there's no way she's choosing Tim Walz again. That was a disaster. And so J.D. Vance, I do see him picking it up. He would be the first Republican to win Minnesota in 56 years, the first since Richard Nixon in 1972. Minnesota was a 4-point state with Walz. If she didn't choose Walz and chose Shapiro, the state probably would have been decided by 1 or 2. She potentially even could have lost it entirely. We also have Virginia, where the Democrats' margin was basically cut in half. Joe Biden carried it by 10 in 2020. This was the best Democratic performance in nearly a century. But then again, Kamala Harris comes in, she wins it by just 5 points. It is definitely going to get closer in the future, especially as Virginia continues to shift rightward. I mean, in 2021, we saw the election of Glenn Youngkin. In 2025, we have another governor's election there, and governors in Virginia are limited to 1 consecutive term. So if Youngkin wants to become governor again, he's going to have to wait until 2029. That race is going to be interesting to watch, but on the presidential level, Virginia is nowhere near as liberal as it once was. And finally, the last state for Republicans on this map is going to be New Hampshire, a state that was incredibly close in 2016. Trump came within half a percentage point of winning. In 2020, Joe Biden did do much better. He carried it by 7.4. But again, with Kamala Harris, everything just gets worse. She's going to win by just 3% in the Granite State. This is a terrible margin considering the last time she was on a presidential ticket with Biden, she carried it by over double that margin. So New Hampshire is going to go red. It's definitely one of those states in the very middle. It can vote for either party. Republicans haven't won it on the presidential level since 2004, but Vance could be the first in 24 years. And so now we're left with just the 2 tilt Democratic states. One of them isn't even a state, but we do have New Mexico. I do see Democrats holding on to the state one last time before it turns red. Hispanic voters have turned on the Democratic Party. That is why New Mexico was so much more competitive in 2024. Harris wins it by just 6%. Even though Joe Biden carried it by 11 4 years prior. We're going to see another big shift as more minority voters continue moving away from the Democrats. And then we have the 2nd District of Nebraska. She won it in 2024. I can see her barely holding on to it if she runs in 2028. And so this is my very early 2028 presidential election prediction between J.D. Vance and Kamala Harris. If Kamala Harris is indeed the nominee again, right now it seems like that is possible, but she's definitely not who Democrats want. She caused the disaster that we saw a few weeks ago for the party, while Republicans, Vance is the favorite, and he is who the party should go with. And so if the two were to go up head-to-head, I have J.D. Vance at 339 electoral votes, Kamala Harris at 199. She becomes the first Democrat to not win 200 electoral votes since 1988. J.D. Vance becoming the first Republican to win over 330 in that same period. And so this would be an even larger landslide for Republicans as they continue their electoral college dominance. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe right now for more content like this, and I'll see you guys in the next video.